computer.
There you
Right.
go. So for coming. Oh, so thank you very much for taking some time out of your evening to listen to this webinar. It's my first on, apart from being the first Climate Action Week, it's my first webinar about the circular economy, and I'm really pleased to be able to bring it to you. So we'll get cracking. So this evening, I'm going to be talking about the circular economy or circular living. Those questions kind of not the questions, the words can be intermingled. But I suppose in previous years, someone in my role might have talked about waste management, which is what this job really was about before I started here with Collar County Council. But as I'm about to explain shortly, we've now gone beyond waste management. We're actually producing so much waste that we can't continue in the same way, never mind manage it. Life forms are literally drowning in our rubbish. And as a result, we're now moving into a phase of circular living, as our ancestors did for millennia, in an attempt to rectify the damage we've done. So as I said, today I'm going to be talking about what the circular economy is, or what circular living means, what we're wasting and why it matters, and more positively, what we can do about it. So we'll get cracking. Over the past 100 years or so, we've been operating in a very linear economy. This means that we've been taking materials from the earth, making things, using them, and then dumping them. And this has been dominating the way we live. But this way of living isn't sustainable. We're beginning to see that now in all of our news feeds. And as a result of our linear lives, we've now overshot 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries that support life on Earth. These are boundaries such as biodiversity loss, climate change, and ocean acidification, amongst some of them. We're disproportionately impacting low-income nations, and in some cases, we're causing irreparable damage to our planet. So that moves us to the second stage, the recycling economy. So as we began to realize the effect of our actions, we began to recycle more. This has allowed us to use materials that are already in the system, rather than extracting them from the ground. The extraction and processing of natural resources is driving all aspects of our planetary crisis now. So recycling is an improvement, and it's certainly environmentally better to reuse than to continue to extract virgin materials, but it's only a temporary solution. We're still drowning in the damn rubbish. In an effort to fix this, you'll begin to hear more and more about us moving towards a more circular way of living, where we design goods to not only last, but to be used time and time again, and perhaps in different ways, before ultimately allowing them to restore the land we live in by regeneratively adding to the soil. And I'll explain what I mean by that in the next slide. So a move towards a more circular way of living is therefore key to us reversing some of the planetary overshoots I mentioned, and will help us to reach our environmental targets. So to summarize all of that, the circular economy isn't about recycling, that's the last resort. The circular economy is a model of production and consumption that involves sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, and then recycling existing materials and products so they'll last as long as possible and reduce our waste to an absolute minimum. Ultimately, though, it's about design. Apologies for my icon seem to have moved around. My screen swapped before we started, but anyway. So a moment ago there, I mentioned a more regenerative model of living. And to explain that a bit more clearly, I just want to look at the example of a tree. So currently we might plant a sapling, or it plants itself, and it grows away, providing a habitat to a myriad of creatures above and below ground, sequestering carbon from the atmosphere to prevent our planet from overheating. It provides beautiful landscapes for us to enjoy as it grows, as well as soaking up water and preventing flooding. To look at that tree with a more circular head on, we could plant a tree and use it to help us live more comfortably. We could cut and then burn the tree to heat our homes, or, as the eloquent Ellen MacArthur puts it in her TED Talk, we could use the tree to make a table, and when it stops being a table, it can become chipboard. After it finishes as chipboard, it can become particle board, and if designed correctly, it could then go into a biodigester, and all the materials could be recovered and used for heat, light, and fertilizer. This is a circular system in action, or design thinking, and not a linear system, as is mostly the case nowadays. So that table that was made from that tree was designed to be reused in such a way that its core material could be used again and again, and systems were in place to aid this recovery. Or in other words, you've now also heard of systems thinking in action. Those two terms really, design thinking and systems thinking, used to confuse me, but that hopefully has explained it a bit more. And that's really the simple crux of it. So this example that I've just given highlights how we need to rethink the way we operate in a much more circular way, starting with the design. But then if we're looking at goods that are already out there, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, and then recycling those existing materials and products. So I'll share some examples where that's already happening at the end of my talk. But by shifting our economy from linear to circular, we shift the focus from extraction of raw materials, which we simply can't keep on doing, to regeneration. And we shift from the term waste to resource. So instead of continuously degrading nature, we help to rebuild nature's resources. We employ farming practices that allow nature to rebuild soils and increase biodiversity, and we return biological materials to the earth. So it's this circular system. Currently, most of the materials are lost after we use them, and the land used to grow them is depleted of nutrients. If we move to a more regenerative model, we begin to emulate natural systems. So there's no waste in nature. When a leaf falls from a tree, it feeds the forest. For billions and billions of years, natural systems have regenerated themselves. So really, waste is a human invention. Before I move on to what we can do, I think it's good to put our waste into context and to look at the question of what we are wasting. So be warned, I'm going to throw some pretty large figures at you in the next few slides. In Ireland, our economy is booming. We currently have the fastest growing economy in Europe and one of the lowest unemployment rates for a very long time. And as our economy began to improve, so too did our mass consumption of goods and materials. But that's all come at a cost. Too good to be true, wasn't it, really? Given that we're such a small country with a relatively small population, we're above the global average in Ireland and we're surpassing sustainable levels. Whilst we're seeing continued economic growth, our material consumption is at its highest point in 5 years and it's still rising. On average, high-income countries such as Ireland use 6 times more materials per person and are responsible for 10 times more climate impacts than low-income countries. It's not all doom and gloom. The great news is that we're now recycling more than we've ever done. However, we're now creating more waste than ever. So at the beginning of September this year, we had already exceeded the total amount of plastic waste that our waste management systems can handle here in any given year. So every new piece of plastic we now use is plastic that we don't have the capacity to handle or deal with at the moment. The recycling for municipal and packaging waste streams can't keep pace with our waste generations levels, which is undermining all of the efforts that we're doing in trying to recycle and the rest of it. So we're heavily reliant on exporting our waste for final treatment overseas, but the overseas market can't cope with it all either. There's just too much, as I said before. So to try and slow this down and encourage better practices from governments and the rest of us, Since 2021, plastic packaging that is not recycled in member EU states has been subject to a financial contribution. In 2021, Ireland contributed €215 million to that fund for that year. And to put that into perspective, in the recent 2024 budget, that will be the equivalent of 38%, or well over a third of the money that has been allocated to build 10,000 new homes in Ireland. So I'll just say that again, since in the recent budget, the equivalent of over a third of the money allocated to build 10,000 homes in Ireland has been paid to fund basically fining us for not dealing with our rubbish. We can't go on this way. We have to change, and we simply need to stop using and consuming as much stuff. And this isn't just one person or one group or one political party's responsibility. We're all consumers and we all need to step up. So, to provide a bit more context, it might surprise you to consider that over 97% of materials in Ireland's economy come from virgin sources. So they're basically coming from the land, 97%. And with the remainder of the materials being used by the Irish economy coming from secondary sources, so upcycling and recycling and stuff. You'll start to hear a new term being used in the coming months, the bioeconomy, which means using forestry, fisheries, and terrestrial agriculture with more sustainable practices, using biological resources to make things, and replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy. But with 90% of the things we make in Ireland coming from virgin materials, it's safe to say that our bioeconomy is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And sadly, that accounts for over 90% of land use related biodiversity loss. So I'm starting to create a picture here. You can see what's happening. We're using more and more stuff. We're taking from the land, and it's just impacting everywhere. We can't deal with the amount of stuff, and it's not our fault. I'm not blaming any of us. It isn't our fault. We didn't ask for this. However, to an extent. So now we've established we're using and wasting too much stuff. What happens to it when we no longer need it or want it? And to give you an idea of the amount of waste each of us on average generated in 2021, my hubby and I have a camper van. There's a picture of it. It weighs around 3.5 tons when it's fully laden with food, adults, equipment, etc. That's the equivalent in weight to the amount of waste everyone in Ireland creates per person per year. So I'm not sure if that pile of waste there is 3.5 tons, but that van is definitely 3.5 tons when it's fully laden, and I wouldn't want to be run over by it. Once we drop our piece of rubbish in the bin, we forget about it. How many of you just kind of open the bin, put something in, and then think, oh, I wonder where that goes to next? It's gone, it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So what does happen to it? We currently have just 3 active landfills authorised to accept municipal and other waste types. There are also 3 waste-to-energy installations and 4 cement kilns that accept waste for co-incineration as an alternative to fossil fuels. There's no commercial hazardous waste landfill or waste incinerators in Ireland, so all of that is shipped out and we export it. Of the waste exported, most of it goes to recycling or energy recovery, with just a small amount sent to composting. So one of the issues with waste is that we're not separating it correctly. I keep thinking I should be calling it resources. If we were separating it correctly, it would definitely be more of a resource or a material than waste. But at the moment, we're not separating it correctly. So despite efforts to help us improve our waste segregation, I think in Ireland, we can put all of our recycling into one bin to make it easier for us. The government changed it just to help us get recycling more and putting the onus onto the waste recovery centres to separate it for us. But I know in the UK, my 90-year-old father in the UK has to sort his waste into 4 separate wheelie bins. And every county there has different methods of waste collection, meaning if you visit a friend in Essex and then you go and visit another one in Manchester, what you put into the bins differs. So it has been made a lot more easy for us, but unfortunately, it's still not quite working right. Um, we're confused, and as you can see there from the images, it's not quite working. Only 36% of the waste we're putting into our general bins is being put into the correct bin. When waste goes into that general waste bin, it can't be sorted or reused. It's either incinerated or it's sent abroad. And when waste is incinerated, a massive amount of carbon dioxide or CO2 is released into the atmosphere. And really, so it's just one step up from being buried. It's also worth mentioning that of everything recycled, over a third is contaminated by nappies, food waste, and textiles. And so that waste is sent over to cement kilns to become a fuel source. So again, more CO2 is being released. Despite what I've just said there, we are getting better at recycling, but the improvements are being cancelled out by the growing amount of waste generated. So the more we get things right, the more we seem to use and consume. Why does getting it right matter if we can just incinerate everything? I know I've mentioned about the CO2, but you know, we're fueling it, we're burning it. But apart from that, the number of resources needed to make and transport consumables is enormous. It's worth noting that as we transition away from the fossil fuel industry towards renewable energy, the same fossil fuel multinational conglomerates are turning their efforts and dollars towards the plastic industry, given that fossil fuels are one of the major raw materials of plastics. So although recyclables are the last option, at least if we can get it right, many of the recyclable products can be reused and remade. So lots of folk have been giving out about the new reuse bottle scheme, but it's one surefire way of ensuring that aluminium cans and plastic bottles, very important kind of recyclables, are collected correctly, uncontaminated. So when the waste or resources are uncontaminated, they can be used rather than incinerated. Aluminium cans go to a smelter in Europe or the UK for smelting, and they're returned back into the system indefinitely, so they can keep using and using and using the aluminium cans. So instead of extracting aluminium out of the earth, we're reusing over and over the ones that are in the system already. And uncontaminated plastics can be reused between 1 to 10 times, depending upon the type. Coloured plastic, incidentally, is being made here into drainage pipe in Ireland. More and more directives are coming down the line to try and halt bad environmental practices. For example, as a result of the Single-Use Plastic Directive adopted by the EU, there are many single-use plastic products that can no longer be placed on the market in Ireland. So things like cotton bud sticks, cutlery, plates, stirrers, balloon sticks, straws, polystyrene single-use food and beverage containers, they would all now be banned under this directive. Also, I came across one I hadn't heard of, oxo-degradable plastic. So oxo-degradable, oxo products are a conventional plastic that's mixed with an additive in order to imitate biodegradation. These oxo products fragment very quickly into microplastics, but they don't break down like biodegradable and compostable plastics. The microplastics are left in the environment indefinitely. Some of these companies are so sneaky in their attempts to make profit at an expense. So I was glad to hear that they've been outlawed now under this policy. Prices on drinks might have gone up to reflect the money people get back from their returns, but the scheme has proven to be such a success. And of course, we take the bottles and cans back to the return banks. We're given a receipt, and we can either use that receipt in store or we can request money, cash back from it. We don't have to use the receipt in store. We can actually ask for the cash. Over 500 million drinks containers have been returned between February and September this year. which is a major win, really, in terms of the need for reducing that pull on the virgin materials. So along with plastics, another area that we're not doing great on globally is our electrical waste. So many people don't realise that electrical waste can be disposed of free of charge in Ireland. We pay a WEEE fee every time we buy an electrical product. It's already on there, and this has been operating for years. So and waste batteries contain dangerous materials such as mercury. And if these materials get into the air or the water, they can cause serious damage to the environment and to human health. They also contain valuable materials such as gold and platinum and lithium. Recycling and waste batteries is free. It's because we've already paid for them on our products, but you can bring them to your local recycling centre or the civic amenity site, or just drop them into the right box. I mean, many supermarkets have little battery recycling boxes. Just to highlight that if a product needs a battery or a power supply to work properly, it's electrical and electronic equipment, or E for short. Household E includes products such as mobile phones, computers, power tools, headphones, and hair dryers. E used by businesses includes data servers, hospital equipment, and catering equipment. So, as I said, anything with a battery or a plug. But when E products no longer work and they need to be thrown away, they become waste, and that's where we get the we from. We actually is one of the fastest growing waste streams in the world, but it's also one of the most difficult to manage safely. You can bring we to a shop or a retail outlet when you're buying a new product, and you don't have to be in the same place where you bought the original product. The shops are obliged to take it back when you're buying a new one, but only if the shop sells the same type of product. So, for example, you can't return a power drill to a shop that doesn't sell power drills, but you could return a power drill to any other shop that sells a power drill. It doesn't have to be the one that you bought it in. Or, for instance, with batteries, a retailer of car batteries doesn't have to accept portable batteries if they don't sell them. You don't need to buy new batteries to return waste batteries out of a retail outlet either. You can just turn them, send them back anytime. Disposable single-use vape and e-cigarette devices are also E and also contain batteries. So they should be recycled when they reach the end of their useful life and become waste. But you must first remove the tank and the batteries. Don't ever place batteries into rubbish or recycle bins because they can cause fires. So moving on from electrical to biological, another area I want to highlight today is food waste. So more figures, this accounts for 16% of our household waste. And as mentioned earlier, it's 2/3 of that is being placed in the general waste bin rather than brown or compost bins. So this is something we can quite easily kind of switch to, if you like. 16% equates to about 120 kilo of food waste per household. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, we don't produce that much food waste, we can guarantee that someone else is using our bit as well. So it's still a colossal amount. So 120 kilo, that's the equivalent of an industrial washing machine or a full-grown male lion. And that's how much we're wasting every year. There's a cost to that as well. So if you added up the amount that's wasting, it's been estimated that it's between 60 euro a month or about 700 euro a year of our precious earned money, which works out an annual national cost of 1.29 billion. But there are ways of and steps of reducing it. And I'm sure at some point along the way in my role here, I'm going to be doing some food waste workshops. But just to kind of get you thinking in this frame of mind, stopfoodwaste.ie has some fantastic resources. The first one is that they want us all to take the Stop Food Waste Challenge and find out what we waste the most and why we're wasting it. So it's really starting to stock take what's happening in our kitchens. Once we've figured that out, we can shop smarter. So plan the shopping to buy just what we need. So write menus, write shopping lists, and then plan for it. Number three, store food. Learn to store food better to make it last longer. Number four, cook smarter. So plan your meals, as I said, and portion sizes. And then number five, love the leftovers. So same time and money and using the leftovers. So as I mentioned, lots of tips and resources there on stop food waste. Finally, before I move on to the actions we can all take to reduce our carbon footprints, I'd like to take you on a very brief delve into textile waste. My brain has been trying to ignore this for this one for a while, as I felt I could only deal with so many different waste streams. It was just the fashion textile waste just seemed too much to take on as well. So it really is too big to ignore. And it's an area I'm trying to educate, as I said, sorry, there's some banging going on out here. So as you can see there, I'm going to bamboozle you with some figures, but they are pretty stark, aren't they? It's been estimated that 100 to 150 billion garments are made annually, with 70% ending up in landfill. A whopping great 72% of all textile fibres are derived from fossil fuels, with projections indicating that that will grow once again. Fossil fuel companies lose revenue as the squeeze is put on them from renewable energies. So, you know, the more we move away from fossil fuels with diesel and petrol, the more they seem to be ploughing it into textiles and plastics. And I suppose once we start to understand that this is going on, we can address that. So our clothes release 500,000 tons of microfibers. So these minuscule bits of fabric that are released when clothes are worn, washed, or disposed of, and they find their way into our bodies and the natural world, into the oceans every year. And they've estimated it's the equivalent to more than 50 billion plastic bottles in microfibers. And these microfibers are finding their way into our lungs, our blood, our organs, and for pregnant women, breast milk and placentas. It's not only that, every year the sector requires over 2 trillion tonnes of water, which is enough to meet the consumption needs of millions of people. So you get the drift. It's waste and waste and waste. And before I move on from this, just to mention, the textile industry is considered the third biggest polluter in the world, and it's big business. So to give you an idea, I actually thought Boohoo was one of the kind of better ones. But Boohoo had a gross profit, and it's not actually, it's considered ultra fast fashion, but it had a gross profit for 2023 of just under, well, I can't even say that number, 985 million pounds gross profit last year. So their directors don't want us to stop buying their clothing, and why would they? Well, we're swimming in rubbish, they're swimming in dollars. Things are beginning to change, however, and again, it's taking legislation and policies to make it happen. Earlier this year, the French Parliament approved a bill that targets fast fashion and ultra fast fashion sold by online retail giants such as Shein and Temu. In France, they are now the first country in the world legislating to limit the excesses of ultra fast fashion. And as we begin to embrace a more circular economy, new initiatives are popping up. And despite what people think, as I say, governments are reacting, and it mightn't feel as if it's happening as quickly as we would like. It is beginning to happen. Before I move on, I'm just going to remind everyone, in case you haven't seen, there's a clothes swap event taking place in Carlow College this Thursday between 11 and 2. And it's one thing that we can do to start to move away from this kind of marketing that's being thrown at us. So there is a kickback, and as we become more aware of how we're being manipulated at the cost of our planet, we're going to see more and more of it. I screenshot a few ads from the Use Less Plastic Instagram account recently, which really grabbed my attention. I don't know if anybody's familiar with these, but they did actually stop and make me think. I mean, how many hats do we need? How many bags do we need to own? How many pairs of shoes and runners and everything do we need to to own? Can we just stop for a minute and think before we shop? Um, I hope by now you've realized the one takeaway from the last couple of slides, anyway, is that we, the consumers, have immense power. We don't have to buy into the multi-million dollar marketing campaigns that keep us buying all this stuff. We can say no, or we can do our best to choose ethical companies when we shop. Sometimes we make mistakes. It's incredibly hard not to when we're being overwhelmed by marketing schemes that degree educated, trained, and moneyed people are throwing at us repeatedly. But if we want to stop our planet being consumed by our excesses, we have to do our best to ignore them and to find alternatives. So you'd be glad to hear that's what I'm moving on to next, after all that doom and gloom. Um, to actions. The Rediscovery Centre in Dublin has been leading the way in Ireland. It's the National Centre for the Circular Economy. And perhaps as a result of that, communities across the country are setting up initiatives to try and look at reducing the waste. These include clothes swaps. As I mentioned, we've got one here coming up in Carlow, and I really hope lots of people come to it and learn how they work so they can use them and do them in their own communities. Toy libraries. I came across toy libraries only this year, and I just thought, brilliant idea. How long do kids play with toys? And if we could just borrow them, 90% of toys are plastic. But there's definitely community initiatives happening with these pop-up toy library events. Bicycle repair cafes. There's actually a bicycle repair cafe happening this weekend on Sunday at St Patrick's AFC in Grey Cullen, where they're doing a get on your bike maintenance and repair workshop. Local libraries who have books and DVDs and computer games. Some local libraries have musical instruments. Our own local libraries are going to have seeds come the new year. And if we can't get into the libraries, there's a Borrow Box, which is online, and you can borrow magazines and newspapers and books, and it's all online and free. Upcycled fashion. So along with the clothes swaps is a fashion fixes, and we're going to start to see more and more of those coming along, where we learn and relearn how to mend things and remake things out of some of this massive textile waste that we have. Furniture upcycling. Is it a trend? Is it not? But even buying secondhand furniture, I think most of our houses is stocked full of things that have come from Dundeal, Facebook Marketplace, eBay, and the rest of them. So we don't have to buy new. There's lots and lots of alternatives. If we're buying new, we can shop more thoughtfully. So I'm not affiliated in any way with this online store, though I do shop from them. So I grabbed a few images of alternative goods we can buy. They're actually only over the road in Kildare, this business. But I'll just run through these. So bamboo toothbrushes. So have you ever considered that every toothbrush you've ever owned is probably still on this planet somewhere? It's either been buried in landfill, or it could be floating around the atmosphere or in the soil as particles. So bamboo toothbrushes are becoming more popular. When you finish with them, you can snap off the handle and you can put it into your brown bin or compost. And then it depends how fiddly you want to get, but you can actually pull out the nylon brushes and they can be recycled. This is actually, I do use this all the time. It's a deodorant that comes in a cardboard package. It lasts for ages and ages. And then at the end, again, that can go into the compost or the brown bin. Food can be stocked in, instead of using plastics, we could be using string bags to store our fruit and veg. One of my real favourites are the stainless steel containers. They can keep drinks cold for up to 24 hours or hot for 12, depending on the product. I find that water tastes better at the end of its life, and these are highly recyclable. The average lifespan of a stainless steel product is expected to be several decades. So again, it's kind of a reminder as well, and um, thinking about that with the coffee cups as well coming up. When you do choose a product like this, try and think of it thoughtfully. You're going to want to keep it for years, hopefully. So it's not a fashion trend just to be swapped and changed as a new one comes along. So, make sure you like it because you're going to be living with it hopefully for a long time. I really love these cute little Swedish dishcloths here. Each one can be, or the company claim that each one can replace up to 17 rolls of paper towels, and they absorb 20 times their weight and far more hygienic than a sponge, and they don't crumble away either. And they air dry, so they don't breed bacteria. I mentioned the coffee cups. So the Department of Environment estimated that 22,000 coffee cups are disposed of in Ireland every hour. So again, choose wisely. Here we've got the wax bread covers, but also lovely little cotton covers for food bowls. I use these actually, and you can wash them and just keep reusing them. Then we've got the biodegradable bags or compostable bags. They don't compost in our own compost heaps, but you can put them in your brown bins. I was actually noticed, we were out somewhere today and I noticed that they had used lovely um, unbleached paper towels for us to dry our hands with, but then we were putting them into plastic bags that weren't compostable. So it's like try and see it through different eyes. Hopefully, if you're going to put things into compostable bags, or if you're composting things, put them into a bag that will biodegrade or compost as well. The lunchbox, I bought one of these last year. Absolutely love it. Again, it's stainless steel. It's going to last forever. It will take any bump and bang. This particular one will go in the oven, or you could cook a lasagna and put it straight in the oven to heat up. Wooden pegs rather than plastic. Bamboo little takeaway things, and something we did at home recently. We've had a drawer load of knives and forks and spoons, too many. So actually my husband drilled some holes in them, put them on a little ring, and we're using those with our lunches. The shopping bags, I think now we're so used to now saying no to shopping bags, it's even hardly a thing, isn't it? So it shows how easily and how quickly we can change. Bamboo little cleaning cloths for our body washes and natural sponges. Again, it's rather than using the plastic ones. And really what I'm doing here is trying to highlight there are alternatives. Just because we don't see them in the supermarkets, they do exist. You might pay a bit extra, but I suppose if you think of it in terms of okay, you're paying a bit extra to buy it, but it could last you a lot longer and it's going to biodegrade or compost at the end and it's not going to hurt the planet in doing so. And quite often you're supporting small local businesses as well when we're switching to these things. So I kind of think if we can afford it, then it's, you know, I feel I feel morally that I should be trying to switch this way and move it. Um, Lastly, I'm just going to mention the glass jars. So I did read another depressing report recently that said that chemicals from plastic packaging can leak into our food. Is there anywhere this stuff doesn't get? And they were advising that as soon as we buy things, we take them out of the plastic and put them in glass and store them in glass. So we actually at home, we use quite a lot of pickles in salads. I actually make up now. I have a big pickle jar and I make up a week's load of salads that I can just empty into my lovely stainless steel box for my lunches every day. But we know that we're doing this. So we kind of, if we buy pasta, we try and buy it in bulk now. Coffee, we try and buy in bulk. And then we can just decant it into glass jars as and when we can. In terms of the composting and recycling, just a few pointers because I mentioned there at the beginning that lots of people don't know how to do it. So in terms of recycling, the three main things to remember are clean, loose, and dry. If it's clean, loose, and dry, you can put it in the compost bin. You can put in all kinds of paper and cardboard products can go in your, I meant recycling bin, apologies. All clean, loose, and dry can go in your recycling bin. Some of these can go in your compost, but I'm not going to confuse you with this one. Anything like this, any of the butter containers, milk cartons, yogurt pots, once they're clean, don't put them into a bag and then put the bag in the recycle bin. Empty the bag into, because the recycling is sorted by optical sensors, so they actually can't see what's in your bags. So just empty the bag into the recycle bin before you walk away from it. All of the tins, the soda tins now will go into the return facility, but if you don't mind losing your money, you can put them in the recycle bin, but you have already paid to return. And then since this list was released, we can now add to it any scrunchable plastics can now go in your recycle bin as well. So actually it's a colossal amount can go into your recycling bins these days, clean, loose and dry. And then in terms of the brown compost bin, every house in Ireland is now entitled to a brown compost bin. It used to be just available for people in a certain built-up areas, but now we can all have one if we request from our bin supplier. And you can put pretty much everything, kitchen food scraps, scrapings, tea bags, grinders, cooked food, uncooked food, out-of-date food, paper napkins, paper towels, cardboard. So if you had a pizza box, for instance, and one half was soiled, you could put the soiled half in your compost bin and you could put the unsoiled half in your recycle bin. Plant trimmings, grass clippings and leaves, all of this can pretty much go into the brown compost bin. So that really, really reduces the amount that's then going into your black bin. So to recap then, I used to call this zero waste, but I actually think it's very, very difficult to have zero waste in our day and age, but certainly minimal waste. We really can minimize the waste and really contribute towards improving our environment. So the first thing is to rethink, do we need it? So before we hit that buy now button or buy it in the shop, do we need it? Can we get it secondhand? Can we support local and get it? Are we able to refuse non-recyclable products? So if we have a choice between a glass jar and something else that's non-recyclable, can we refuse it? Try and reduce packaging in waste bins. Again, it's like making a decision. So uh, if there's an opportunity to choose something that has less waste than somewhere else, I know in the discount supermarkets, the two one sells all their veg pretty much loose and the other one is pretty much all packed in plastic. So I know which ones we choose to buy from if we're going down that road. Or we could go to the farmer's market that definitely doesn't have anything packaged and just take a basket or a bag with you. Can we reuse things? We've just talked about that, reusing and repairing. Next down, number 6. So these are actually in order. So number 6 is then, can it compost? So if we've used it, instead of putting it in the bin, can we put it in our own compost bins or can we put it into a brown bin? And then finally, of the 7th one is make sure it's loose and dry and recycle. I'm just going to put a warning before this next slide. It's not very nice, but I think it's important to include it. What I really hope you've learned throughout this presentation is that you can make a difference and every single small action helps, no matter how tiny you think it might be. So many of you might have seen this really quite horrible image of the turtle and the straw. It's been around for a long time now. I never bought a plastic straw again after I saw this, and I suspect it probably was the most instrumental thing that happened to kind of get a movement of people who just said stop and ultimately halted the use of plastic straws. When I first saw this image, it occurred to me that that could have been a straw that I'd used in my margarita or one of the kids had had in their McDonald's. Why wouldn't it be? We really don't know where our own personal waste ends up, as I said, once we drop it from our hand. We like to think that it doesn't pollute anywhere, but why wouldn't it? Why shouldn't it? Thank goodness plastic straws are no longer available, along with the many other single plastics, as I mentioned. And actually, that change happened pretty quickly. So once I got over the horror of this image, what it now demonstrates to me is that we can make a difference. We really can make a difference. People often say to me, what difference does it make? Why should I bother recycling or saving energy or doing my bit for the environment? Ireland is such a small country. China is polluting so much more, which actually isn't necessarily the case any longer. But I keep these few words in my head all the time. If you think you're too small to have an impact, try going to bed with a mosquito. Personally, with grandchildren on the way, I now think as I said, I now think I'm morally obliged to do everything I can to change the way we're living for my children, for my grandchildren, and for their grandchildren. And I suppose I just want to leave you with the question, do you? So I'd like to thank you so much for your time this evening. I hope I haven't given you the absolute horrors, and I do hope I've given you some hope into things that we can do and the changes that are happening now because of the circular economy. And thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing now. And if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and fire away.
Hi Dee, can I just say I will stop recording now for this part of it. So, and just to let everyone know that the recording will be sent. Okay.